I just got done watching The Mandalorian Episode 8, Chapter 24, The Return. This is going to be my spoiler review for this episode, the finale of Season 3, as well as the entire Season 3 overall. I definitely want to hear your guys' thoughts down below in the comment section, because if this is the way, then you are certainly in the right place. Make sure to also hit that like and subscribe button, and let's dive into this spoiler review. Again, full spoilers, if you've not watched it, you are warned. So, overall, this was a good finale. It's probably my least favorite finale out of all the seasons of The Mandalorian. And the other reason that I want to put a little tidbit into that is because this episode felt a little bit rushed. If we're getting my cons out of the way, this episode did feel rushed in its pacing, in its execution. Good execution. Loved all the action. But it definitely seems like there was a couple plot points in here where I'm like, okay, that could have been like a whole 10-minute discussion there, more bonding, more interactions between the Mandalorians, specifically the whole thing when they go underground and they're like, we can rest here for a bit, and they're looking at all the plants and everything like that, and then the armor is like, I've brought reinforcements, and I'm like, wait, they were supposed to rest and they were talking, and I really like this conversation. And it's little moments like that. And even towards the end where we're wrapping up everything, where's Grogu and Mando going, all that stuff felt just rushed. Now, if we start off this episode, it kicks off with a ferocious pacing. It has no time to go. It is killer, no filler. And you see Bo-Katan running with everyone. As I'm watching everyone run, I'm like, wait, where's the baby? The baby. We need the baby safe. And it turns out the baby went to go protect and find his daddy, Din. And it was actually kind of interesting to see Din, take on those guys, and then Grogu come in and go, no, no, no. Knocks him out, wins, and it's up to Din and Grogu to go find Moff Gideon and stop him, while Bo-Katan and the rest of the Mandalorians are trying to figure out what's going on. And a lot of their pretty much plan is escape, retreat, come back, and fight, as well as, of course, Wolves is going up there. He's making that his dive bombing sequence, which was great. I thought he was going to die, but that whole dive bombing thing, the entire fleet into Moff Gideon's base, I mean, that was badass. And I think we can say a lot of the visual effects in here is just specifically for these Star Wars series are like top tier, and I loved everything in this finale when it came down to the action. Like, every action set piece got better than the last, specifically like the last final battle sequence when they're flying in. That was just badass. And we're talking about that as they are flying in, and you see them coming in to collide. That was amazing. Bo-Katan with the Darksaber, the armor smashing around. It was great. I love seeing the armor get into action, and it was just... It honestly brought just a tear to my eye. I loved the whole colliding and everything of that nature. It was very, very exciting. And it was badass, like I mentioned. But going from there, if we're going to look at Din and Grogu, they're going through all of Moff Gideon's base. We get a little bit of a subplot with R5, which was cute, because if you're a droid fan, you're going to like that. And he's helping Din get through this and gets him a map and gets him through those shields, which kind of had like aspects of like the Phantom Menace when Darth Maul's facing off against Qui-Gon Jinn and Obi-Wan Kenobi, and even kind of like a little bit of like, oh, it's a hallway sequence like Daredevil. Just a little thing that I noticed, and it was the thing that came out of my mind, but it was badass seeing him take him out. Grogu's just sitting there behind. Kind of wanted him to start throwing the Force around right there, but this is where we get to the interesting aspect. The door opens, and it's clones of Moff Gideon. Now, we obviously know that they've been working with clones. They have this thing called Project Necromancer, which we are all assuming is Palpatine. There's been certain things of them setting up the sequel trilogy in here. And seeing all those clones of Moff Gideon were interesting. Now, they did end up killing them off. And it felt like this is, again, one of those storylines that has been a thread through the last 3 seasons of why did Moff Gideon want Grogu? And right as Moff Gideon comes into play, and he's like, well, they were almost perfect. They were missing one thing. And I said it right before he did. And you can watch my reaction on my second channel in a couple hours when it goes up. But I literally said, the Force. Like, that's literally what you're missing is the Force. And a little rushed again. That's something that I feel like should have dropped like mid-season. That plan, that execution. Moff Gideon should have returned earlier in the season as well. It kind of just was like, poof, okay. Like, that's it. So again, it was cool. I like that they name dropped that. It was awesome. It was expected. Love the fight between Mando and Moff Gideon. And I love when the Praetorian guards come out and Grogu takes him aside when they're about to kill his dad. And he's jumping around, taking them on. Din gets rescued by Bo-Katan once again. And Bo-Katan gets that final fight between Moff Gideon. And of course, the Mandalorian and Grogu are facing off the Praetorian guards. They finish them. And then they come out right as Bo-Katan is losing. right as the Darksaber gets destroyed, which broke my heart because that is like my favorite like artifact from like all of Star Wars. So I was very heartbroken over that. I don't, like, it looks like he almost broke her damn hand. The ship's coming down. Everyone's evacuating, and it's them fighting. And I love how Bo-Katan just takes in what Mando said and no, when the Mandalorians are together. And Din starts shooting at him, and it just becomes a three-way fight against Moff Gideon. And it was epic. And once Moff Gideon blew up in flames, they're preparing for their deaths. And of course, right then and there, Grogu uses the Force, and that Force bubble goes over them, saves them from the flames. They come out, they saved Mandalore. They're giving Paz Vizsla's son that kind of ceremony. Mando walks in, wants to give his own son that thing. The armor says you can't do that. Says, I will adopt him. Then he becomes Din Grogu, which, again, just 2 big thumbs up for me. Love that whole sequence. And as it kind of goes in from there, he becomes the Apprentice. They go to the bar with the New Republic guys. Of course, we see our old favorite friend over there. And there's some nice little director cameos behind him, which I liked. I was hoping Zeb would be there. He wasn't. And there's a nice little sequence, pretty much him saying, well, you guys are going to need some talent out there. I could do some jobs for the New Republic, which, okay, all right, that's what we're going to do. So it means, like, it feels like this was wrapping up everything that was kind of laid out through season 1, 2, and 3, leading us in now. Din and Grogu are now officially, like, adopted father and son, and they're going to do missions and do journeys and fun things like that. And I'm sure this will probably lead them into their way within Ahsoka and everything like that. And if people don't remember, there was a spin-off show called Rangers of the New Republic that was supposed to come out, but then, of course, everything happened with Gina Carano. I have a feeling that some of those storylines are now going to be incorporated into The Mandalorian, which we'll talk about in a second on why I feel like some of this may have rushed this season. But I like that. His one thing he wanted was the IG head. Second that clicked, he's going back to Navarro. He made that the mayor. He gets a little cabin, and you pretty much seen Din relax like this with Grogu about to eat a frog. The typical Star Wars circle goes right around them, happily ever after. Credits roll, no end credit scene. That's it. So, and we know that Jon Favreau has already written season 4. It seems like they are going to be filming it this year. Pedro was not even on, I doubt he was on set for this entire, we didn't see his face. Okay. I like this episode. I like the finale. As a whole, season 3, though, if I'm reviewing it as a whole, it is a little bit of a disappointment. The Mandalorian has been my favorite piece of live-action Star Wars telling for a long time. And honestly, like, I go back and forth if this was my favorite or Clone Wars was my favorite, if we're just talking Star Wars TV. Mandalorian has now dropped a bit for me. Now, I still love Din. I still love Grogu. I love that they focus Bo-Katan in here. But if you're asking me to rank it, I think this did get a little bit faltered, specifically because of this season. And a lot of that is just rushed elements. Now, the pros for this season, I love that they focused on Bo-Katan. I love that they focused more on the Mandalorian culture. We got to experience more of the Mandalorian, because in reality, we haven't seen a lot of that in live action or television. We have really just seen the bare bones of it, and specifically we get a lot of this in canon, and like not even canon, but legends books and comics, and that's where we got a lot of that Mandalorian legend and lore to it all. I'm happy that the show finally dove into that, so we got to know more of the Creed and everything of that nature, and seeing them take back Mandalore, that was great. It was action-packed. All the action was fantastic, and again, I love seeing the Mandalorians bond and come together and actually work, because in reality, they've been separated specifically since the Clone Wars days, and some may argue even before then. So, again, love Bo-Katan. I'm a little bit sad that Din kind of got shoved to the side, which is funny, because when he came into the Book of Boba Fett, he was like the ultimate player, and he was awesome in there. But then it kind of segued and sidelined Boba Fett. Kind of the same thing here with Bo-Katan. I'm not as mad because I do like what they do with Bo-Katan overall as a character. It just kind of seems like by the end, like, her and Din didn't really say goodbye. They just went off to their own thing. Bo-Katan, they relit the Forge and everything like that. All the Mandalorians are reclaiming Mandalore and they're rebuilding it. Awesome. Like where Mando's going. I like that we're going back on the journeys. Curious to see where that ties in. Does that tie into Ahsoka's journeys? Does that, again, tie into that spin-off show, maybe some of the storylines in there, because they were like heating up on pre-production for that. That's where it comes to my issues. Overall, the threads through seasons 1 to seasons 3, I understand we're getting more seasons, but everything's pretty much tied up. Every question I had, why did they want Grogu? Where does Grogu come from? Which, again, we learned, and there's obviously still some backstory to that, I'm sure we'll find out, but pretty much every question has been answered. And I like the answers, but everything just really feels rushed in execution. And I really can't help but feel that, and again, I just didn't like the CEO, Bob Chapek, but it seems like a lot of stuff under him came out rushed. And I don't know, that this is just me theorizing, but I genuinely am a little bit disappointed with that, and it just feels that overall the season was rushed, and every single plot line, oh, we got this, okay, now that's over. Okay, now we got the, oh, okay, now that's over. And every single thing I just wanted more time with, and specifically everything in this finale, the finale should have been longer. There's a lot of things like that. A lot of these episodes should have been longer. And now looking back at the Dr. Pershing episode, which was a very fascinating episode, really didn't do anything. I genuinely mean that. Like, that episode was a waste of time. It was genuinely a waste of time. Which sucks because it's an interesting episode. It feels very Andor-ish. And, you know, you have this other person who screwed Dr. Pershing over. I cannot remember her name, but... And she's giving the information to, of course, Moff Gideon, which I'm assuming now she was just a spy, which is dumb because we obviously knew that from the start. But what, she gave information and that's it. Again, maybe this ties in later on, but everything was resolved. Moff's dead. And he should have been a part of the season a lot longer. There's a lot of baffling choices in here for me. And then there's a lot of great stuff. I think this is the weakest season of The Mandalorian. Like, if I were to rate an actual scale of it, I'd probably give it a 6.5 or a 7. The first two seasons I'd give, like, almost a freaking 10 to. I love those first two seasons. Like, 9.5 at least. This season, I liked. I'm hoping season 4 can, like, kind of reclaim that magic and kind of bring us around. Because it seems like the next season might be a reboot of everything and a retooling. But... with that said, those are my thoughts on The Mandalorian Season 3 and, in general, the finale. I definitely want to hear your guys' thoughts. Remember, this is the way. We'll be definitely covering Secret Invasion when that comes out in June. I also have a Guardians of the Galaxy early review coming up next week, so if you're a fan of Guardians of the Galaxy, I will be seeing that early. I also have Evil Dead Rise, Bo is Afraid, the brand new A24 film from Ari Aster, tons of movie content, tons of TV content coming soon. Thank you so much again for watching this, and of course, until next time, may the Force be with us all.